have the highest sales numbers in my department for 3 consecutive years. I trained half the people on my team. I literally wrote the onboarding manual they still use today. So when my new manager called me into his office and slid a performance improvement plan across the desk, I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. And what I discovered about why I was really on that PIP made me realize this company never wanted me to improve. They wanted me gone. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started. I'd been working at Meridian Financial Services for 7 years. I started as a junior account coordinator, fresh out of college, and I clawed my way up to senior account manager. My territory was the entire Pacific Northwest region, and I'd grown it by 240% since I took over. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because you need to understand that I was good at my job, really good. For 6 of those 7 years, I reported to a woman named Patricia. She was tough but fair. She pushed us hard, but she also fought for us. When I exceeded my targets, she made sure I got the bonuses I deserved. When I had a family emergency, she covered my accounts personally so I could take the time I needed. Patricia was the reason I stayed at Meridian through 2 acquisition attempts and a complete restructuring. Then, 8 months ago, Patricia announced she was retiring early. Health reasons, she said, though I suspected the new executive leadership had something to do with it. The company had been changing, and not for the better. Her replacement was a man named Derek Holloway. He came from a competitor, and from day one, something felt off. He was charming in meetings with upper management, all smiles and firm handshakes, but with the team, cold, dismissive. He'd interrupt us mid-sentence, take credit for ideas he'd shot down weeks earlier, and had this way of making you feel small without ever raising his voice. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. New managers need time to adjust, right? Maybe he was just nervous. Maybe he'd warm up. He didn't warm up. He got worse. 3 months into his tenure, Derek hired his former colleague, a woman named Vanessa, as assistant regional manager, a position that didn't exist before she arrived, a position that, coincidentally, came with a salary that should have gone toward the raises we'd been promised. Vanessa was pleasant enough on the surface, but I quickly noticed something disturbing. Every time I submitted a report, she'd request revisions, not because anything was wrong, but because she wanted it in a different format, a format she'd change again the following week. I was spending hours reformatting perfectly good work instead of actually selling. When I brought this up to Derek, he nodded sympathetically and said he'd talk to her. The next day, I got an email from Vanessa CCing Derek, thanking me for my patience during the transition period and reminding me that adaptability was a core company value. That was when I started keeping records. I created a folder on my personal cloud drive. Every email, every message, every revised report. I documented the dates, the times, the specific requests. I didn't know why I was doing it exactly. Call it instinct. 4 months in, Derek called me into his office for what he described as a routine check-in. I walked in expecting the usual. Instead, he slid a manila folder across the desk. "This is a performance improvement plan," he said, his tone almost apologetic. "I know this might come as a surprise, but there have been some concerns about your recent performance." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. The PIP cited 3 main issues. First, failure to meet formatting standards on submitted reports. Second, inability to adapt to new departmental processes. Third, and this one still makes my blood boil, creating a negative team environment through resistance to leadership direction. I stared at that document and my hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. "Derek," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I exceeded my sales target 18% last quarter. I brought in the Morrison account, which was worth $400,000. I've had 0 client complaints in 7 years. He nodded, that practiced sympathetic expression on his face, and "We appreciate your sales contributions, but being a team player is about more than numbers. It's about attitude. It's about being coachable." Coachable, a word I'd never heard applied to me in 7 years until this man showed up. The PIP gave me 60 days to improve. The metrics were vague: demonstrate improved collaboration with department leadership, show willingness to adapt to evolving processes, maintain a positive and supportive attitude in team settings. How do you measure attitude? How do you prove you're being positive enough? You can't, and that's exactly the point. I signed the PIP because I had to, but I went home that night and I cried. Not because I thought I deserved it, but because I suddenly understood what was happening. This wasn't about my performance. This was about building a paper trail. This was about making my eventual termination look justified. I called my friend Rachel, who works in HR at another company. When I described the situation, she went quiet for a long moment. "Honey," she finally said, "you're being managed out. The PIP isn't meant to help you improve. It's a legal shield when they fire you." She explained how it works. You put someone on a PIP with subjective, unmeasurable goals. No matter what they do, you document that they fell short. Then, when you terminate them, you have a file full of evidence showing you gave them every opportunity. It protects the company from wrongful termination lawsuits. I spent that whole night wide awake, staring at the ceiling. 7 years. 7 years of my life, my best work, my loyalty, and this is how they were going to end it? But here's the thing about me. I don't go down without a fight. The next morning, I started digging. I requested copies of my performance reviews for the past 3 years. All exceeds expectations or outstanding. I pulled my sales numbers, my client retention rates, my training evaluations when I onboarded new hires. Spotless. Better than spotless. Then I started talking to my coworkers, quietly, carefully, and what I discovered made everything click into place. I wasn't the only one on a PIP. 3 other people on the team had received them in the past 2 months. All women, all over 40, all high performers who had been with the company for 5+ years. Meanwhile, Vanessa had just hired 2 new junior account managers, both from Derek's old company, both in their mid-20s, both making significantly less than us. Okay, I need to stop here for a second because this is where I had to make a decision that would change everything. Subscribe if you think what Derek and Vanessa were doing was completely illegal. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my shoes because I was about to do something that could have ended my career entirely. But when I tell you what I found in those emails, you're going to understand exactly why I did what I did next. I went back to my documentation folder. Months of emails, revision requests, and passive-aggressive messages. But I needed more. I needed proof that this was coordinated. That's when I remembered something. About a month earlier, Vanessa had accidentally forwarded me an email chain instead of a single message. She'd recalled it within minutes, and I'd assumed it was just an embarrassing mistake. I deleted it from my inbox without reading closely. But I use a personal backup system for all my work emails. Company policy actually required it for client communications, and I just applied it to everything. I found the email. My heart stopped when I read it. The chain was between Derek, Vanessa, and someone in HR named Tom. They were discussing the restructuring of the Pacific Northwest team, and there it was, in black and white. Derek had written, and I quote, "We need to clear out the legacy employees before Q3. The PIPs should give us enough cover. Start with the 4 highest salaries and work down. Vanessa's people can absorb the accounts." Vanessa had replied, "Already started the documentation process. Give me another 6 weeks and we'll have everything we need." Tom from HR had responded with a single word, "Perfect." I read that email chain 7 times. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely scroll. They weren't even trying to hide it among themselves. They were systematically eliminating experienced, well-paid employees and replacing us with cheaper labor. The PIPs were never about performance. They were a weapon. I printed everything. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence I had. I made 3 copies, one for my lawyer, one for a safe deposit box, and one for exactly what I was about to do. But I didn't go to HR. Tom was in on it. I didn't go to Derek's boss. I'd seen how cozy they were at company events. I needed to go higher, much higher. Meridian Financial Services was a subsidiary of a larger parent company called Ashford Holdings. Ashford had just gone through a massive diversity and inclusion initiative after some bad press the previous year. They'd made very public commitments about fair treatment, age discrimination, and workplace equity. I found the email address for Ashford's CCO, and I sent everything. I titled the email, Documented Evidence of Coordinated Discriminatory Practices at Meridian Financial Services. I laid out the timeline, attached the evidence, and named every person involved. I CC'd my personal lawyer, who had advised me to create a paper trail of my own. Then I waited. For 3 days, nothing happened. I went to work, I kept my head down, I submitted my reports in whatever format Vanessa requested that week, I smiled in meetings, I was the picture of a coachable employee. On day 4, Derek called me into his office again. I assumed this was it. The 60-day PIP period wasn't over, but maybe they'd decided to accelerate the timeline. Instead, Derek looked like he'd seen a ghost. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice strained. "The PIP you received was issued in error. We're removing it from your file effective immediately. I apologize for any confusion this may have caused." I stared at him. "A misunderstanding?" "Yes," he couldn't meet my eyes. "Your performance has always been exemplary. This was a clerical error." I didn't respond. I just nodded and walked out. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed. Derek announced he was leaving for a new opportunity. Vanessa's position was eliminated due to restructuring. Tom from HR took early retirement. The other 3 women who had been put on PIPs received the same magical news that theirs had been issued in error. And then I got a call from Ashford headquarters. A woman named Diane, a senior VP of Human Capital, wanted to fly in and meet with me personally. She thanked me for bringing this to their attention. She explained that Ashford took these matters seriously and that they were conducting a full investigation. She asked if I would be willing to participate. I said yes. The investigation took 3 months. I was interviewed 4 times. I provided every document I had, and when it was over, I received a formal letter of apology from Ashford Holdings, a significant financial settlement that I can't disclose due to the NDA, and an offer of a promotion to regional director. I thought long and hard about that promotion. Part of me wanted to take it, to prove that I'd won, but another part of me knew that this company, despite the house cleaning, had allowed this culture to exist. They'd hired Derek, they'd approved the phantom position for Vanessa, they'd let Tom and HR enable the whole scheme. I declined the promotion. I gave my 2 weeks' notice and walked out of Meridian Financial Services for the last time with my head held high. I'm at a new company now, smaller, but the culture is everything Meridian pretended to be. My new boss actually asked for my input during my first week. She wanted to know what she thought we could do better. I almost cried. I still have that original PIP document. I keep it in my desk drawer at home, not because I'm angry anymore, but because it reminds me of something important. When someone puts you on a performance improvement plan that doesn't match your actual performance, it's not about you, it's about them. And the best thing you can do is document everything, trust your instincts, and never let anyone make you believe you're less than what you know you are. Sometimes the trap they set for you becomes the evidence that brings them down. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next video. And if you've ever been put on a suspicious PIP, been managed out, or experienced any kind of workplace injustice, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments or send it to us directly. Your experience might be the next story we share, because the more we talk about this, the harder it becomes for them to get away with it. Until next time, take care of yourselves out there.